The first cousin had been at the back door of the warehouse before dawn, and by the time the housekeeper carried coffee into the study, the wife already knew what he had done. She knew because the foreman had come up the gravel drive at 6 with his cap in his hand. The way men used to come up that drive in the years before her husband had spent every late night of 8 long years walking the family out of that life. The foreman had not asked for the boss. He had asked for her. He had stood in the marble hall with the rain running off his coat and said, "Signora, the young one has done a thing this morning that you and the man upstairs are going to want to know about by breakfast, not by lunch." The housekeeper, a small gray woman named Iolanda, set the coffee tray down on the inlaid table and stepped back without a word. She had watched the wife sit at that desk in her bare feet at 6 every morning for 8 years, reading the night's reports from the 4 legitimate companies the man upstairs had built out of the rubble of the old one. She had watched her go from a young bride with a law degree she had never been allowed to use to the second signature on every clean contract that left this house. She had never had reason to be afraid for her until this morning. The wife was sitting at the desk in a plain navy dress, with her hair already pinned. She had not slept. The lamp on the desk was the only light in the room. In front of her was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, that the foreman had given her in the hall. "Iolanda," she said, without looking up. "Don't wake him, Signora," the housekeeper said. "He has been awake an hour. Then take the coffee up. Tell him I will come." Iolanda took the tray to the door, hesitated, and turned back. She knew the difference between loyalty and silence. "Signora," she said, "the foreman is still in the kitchen. Should he go?" "No, he should eat. Tell the cook to feed him properly, and tell him I will come and speak to him before I drive." "You are driving, Signora?" "I am driving." The housekeeper closed the door. The wife folded the foreman's handwritten sheet, and then again, and slid it into the small leather portfolio that had belonged to her grandmother, a woman who had outlived 3 husbands and become, in her country town, the one whose signature a man went to before he went to a priest. The wife was 41. She had been raised at her grandmother's elbow from the age of 9 in a country town her grandmother had ruled for 40 years. Her grandmother had read law to her every evening out of a tall green book that smelled of cedar. By 18, she knew the civil code the way other girls knew the words to songs. By 23, she had passed the bar. By 26, she had refused the marriage her father had arranged and taken instead the marriage to the man upstairs. She had known what he was when she married him. She had also known what he told her, in a small empty church on a cold winter evening, that he had inherited a thing he had not asked for at 32 when his father went into the ground, and that he meant, with whatever years God gave him, to walk the family out of that thing, as far as the law would let him walk it, and then 1 inch further. She had asked how long. He had said 10 years, perhaps 12. She had said, "Then we have 10 or 12 years of hard work in front of us." She had said it the way her grandmother used to say a thing was decided. It had been 8 years today. She knew the 8 years by the date because she had begun the count herself on a kitchen calendar the first morning after the funeral, the morning she had sat at this same desk with her husband and helped him write the first quiet letter to the first quiet bank. 8 years of refused contracts. 8 years of selling, in pieces, the parts of the old family that could not be cleaned. 8 years of converting 2 ports in a string of small haulage yards into 4 real audited companies that paid real taxes, did real work, and had between them 611 employees with health insurance and a profit-sharing scheme she had drafted herself. And this morning, a 26-year-old first cousin of her husband's, raised by an aunt who had never forgiven the family for going quiet, had taken 3 trucks out of the smallest of those 4 companies before dawn and moved a cargo through the old back gate of a yard the family had sold 5 years ago. He had used the company's drivers, the company's plates, a manifest clean on its face, and a load underneath that was not. He had done it, the foreman said, because his friends had told him for 2 years that the family had gone soft, and that one good run, on his own, would put his name back where his grandfather's name had been. The foreman had caught him at the third bay on his way out. He had walked the cousin into the office, closed the door, stood him against the wall, and called the wife. The wife stood up from the desk. She put the leather portfolio under her arm. She went upstairs. Her husband was sitting on the edge of the bed in his shirt sleeves, coffee untouched. He was a tall man, broad at the shoulder, gray beginning at the temples now, with a face that had grown over these 8 years into the kind of face a man wore when he had been keeping a long, careful promise. He looked up as she came in, and saw before she said anything what kind of morning it was going to be. His mouth tightened. He did not stand. "Which one?" he said. She told him. He closed his eyes. For a long moment he did not speak. Then he said the cousin's name softly, the way a man says the name of a child he has lost faith in. What did he move? I do not know yet. Who knows? The foreman. 2 of his men. Iolanda. Now you. And you. And me. He breathed out through his nose. I will go down. Clang, clang. No, she said. You will not go down. He looked up at her then, with the steadiness he kept for the very few people who could put a sentence to him in that tone. She set the portfolio on the bed. He is your father's brother's son, she said. If you go down to that warehouse this morning, you go down as the head of this house. There can be a furious cousin downstairs. There cannot be the head of this house downstairs telling a young man he has shamed the family, because then we are running an old kind of room again, and the line we have been walking for 8 years stops being a line. It becomes a story we tell ourselves. He looked at her for a long count of breath. Then he nodded. Once. What do you want? I want you to stay in this house today. I want you to send no one. I want you to make no telephone call to that warehouse, or to that yard, or to anyone in the family. I want the cousin held in the foreman's office until I come back. I want you to not speak to him. I want the trucks not to move. I want everything photographed where it stands. And I want the manifest, the real one and the one he wrote. Where are you going? First, to the warehouse. Then to my office. Then to the regulator. She watched the small movement in his throat when she said the last word. You are going to disclose it, he said. I am going to disclose it before the cousin's friends, whoever they are. Disclose it for him. I am going to walk into the regulator's office at noon with a voluntary report, the photographs, the manifest, the cousin's signed account, and a letter from us severing him from every company we own. I am going to tell them the company caught it inside the first hour, and the company is reporting itself. I am going to ask for a compliance audit at our expense, and ask them to send their own people to the yard before we touch another inch of that load. They will fine us. They will fine us. The fine is the smaller of 2 prices. If they hear it from us first, the fine is the only price. If they hear it from somebody else first, the price is the 8 years. He was very still. And the cousin, he said. He will sign a paper resigning from every position he holds in any of our companies. He will sign a second acknowledging in his own hand that he acted alone, against the standing instructions of the boards. He will leave the house today, and he will not come back. He will be put on a long train south, to his mother's people, with enough money for 1 year and instructions never to use any name that connects him to us. He will not be touched. He will not be punished by us. He will be allowed to live a small, quiet life, if he can manage one. And the door of this house will close behind him. He is my blood. He is your blood. He is also, this morning, the only person in 500 miles who could undo what you have done. He sat with that. Then he stood, walked to her, and put his hands on her shoulders the careful way he did only in this room. He looked down at her for a long, quiet moment, the way a man looks at the one person who has held his life together for 8 years. Go, he said. I will be back by 4. Iolanda will sit at the door until you are. She went down the stairs. In the kitchen, the foreman was finishing a plate of eggs. He stood when she came in. She told him what she had told her husband. She told him to drive ahead of her to the warehouse and let nothing move before she arrived, to wake the company's legal counsel and have him meet her at her office at 9. To telephone the head of compliance for the parent holding company and have her meet them at the regulator's office at 12. Signora, the foreman said, if you will let me say it. Say it. In 43 years, I have worked for 3 of you. Your husband's grandfather, his father, your husband. None of the 3 would have walked into the regulator's office this morning. They would have buried the cargo. They would have buried the cousin's mistake. In time, they would have buried the cousin.
He stopped. I would have helped them.
And this morning I am driving ahead of you to that warehouse, he said. And I am very glad I have lived long enough to do it. She let him out the back door before her. She put on her coat. Iolanda was standing in the marble hall with a small umbrella for her. The housekeeper held the front door open and watched the wife walk out into the rain alone, in the navy dress, with the leather portfolio under her arm. The warehouse was 20 minutes away. She drove herself, the way she had for every meeting that mattered in 8 years. A woman in her own 10-year-old saloon did not look to a regulator's office the way a woman in a long, quiet car looked. The cousin was standing against the wall of the foreman's office when she walked in. A thin, tall young man with his father's mouth and none of his grandfather's calm. He looked at her once and looked away. She set the leather portfolio on the metal desk and sat down. She took out the documents her counsel had drafted with her on the telephone at 3 in the morning of the day she married into this house, against exactly this hour. She read each one aloud, in the plain, neutral voice she had learned at her grandmother's elbow when she was 12. She asked at the end if he had understood. He said he had. She asked him to sign. He signed. She countersigned. She told him, in the same neutral voice, that a car would take him to the house to pack 1 suitcase, a second to the station, that he had until 9 that evening to be on the train south, that he would never again be welcomed at any door of any family that bore the name he had been born to, and that the house would not lift a hand against him so long as he kept the silence he had now signed. She told him she was sorry. She meant it. He cried. She did not look away. At 9, she was at her downtown office with the company's legal counsel. By 11, the photographs, the 2 manifests, the signed account, the severance papers, and the voluntary disclosure letter were in a clean black folder. At 12, she walked into the regulator's office with the head of compliance at her elbow and laid the folder on the deputy commissioner's desk. The deputy commissioner was a woman she had argued a tax matter with 3 years ago. She read the cover letter twice and looked up. "You are reporting yourselves," the deputy commissioner said. "We are reporting ourselves." Within 12 hours of the act. Within 8. The deputy commissioner closed the folder. She studied the wife's face for a moment, and the wife saw, in that moment, the small flicker of something she had been working for 8 years to see in the face of any officer of the state who looked at her family. "Sit down, Signora," the deputy commissioner said. "We have a long afternoon." It was a long afternoon. There would be a fine. There would be the audit. There would be 6 months of quiet, difficult meetings, 1 bad week in the press, and a number on the company's annual filing she would have to look at, in her own hand, for the rest of her working life. There would also, by the time she drove back up the gravel drive at 4 minutes to 4, still be the 4 companies, still be the 611 employees, still be the 8 years. The housekeeper opened the door for her. Her husband was standing in the marble hall. He did not ask her how it had gone. He looked at her in the navy dress, with the rain on her shoulders, with the leather portfolio still under her arm, and he understood the way he had always understood her, by reading her face the way a careful reader reads the only page that matters. He took the portfolio from her and set it on the inlaid table. He put both his hands on her face the way he had in the small empty church the evening he had asked her, and he said the only thing a man like him could say to a woman like her on the evening of a day like this. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping us where we said we would be." She closed her eyes for a moment and let him hold her face. Behind him, in the long, quiet hall, Iolanda stood with her hands folded at her waist and watched them, the man who had walked his family out of the old life and the woman who had refused, in the small hours of one rainy morning, to let a young cousin walk them back into it. The old housekeeper thought, in the small, steady way she had been thinking about that house for 40 years, that the family she had served as a girl had had many kinds of strength, but the family she was serving now had something the old one never had. It had a wife at its desk by 6 in the morning. It had a foreman in its kitchen who was glad he had lived to drive ahead of her. It had a door that closed behind a cousin who had tried to undo it, and a door that opened for a tired woman in a navy dress at 4 minutes to 4. And it had at last become a house that the state itself could walk into in daylight without anyone in it having to look away. Iolanda turned and went back to the kitchen and put the kettle on, because that was what was left to do in a house that had, by the grace of one quiet woman and one long-kept promise, lived through the morning that could have ended it.